การระเบิดของ SpaceX Starship อนาคตของภารกิจไปดาวอังคารคืออะไรดำดิ่งสู่ความล้มเหลวในการทดสอบการบินล่าสุดของ SpaceX Starship และผลกระทบต่อภารกิจไปดาวอังคารในอนาคต
Welcome back, everybody. I know we're all kind of reeling still from that SpaceX Starship test flight and what it all means for, well, getting humans to Mars someday. And then on top of that, we have astronauts that are stuck on the ISS thanks to a whole other spacecraft having issues. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, no kidding. It's definitely been a crazy week for space news.
So let's just jump right in, shall we?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so anyone out there who may have missed the latest news. Can we just rewind for a sec? Remind us what exactly happened with this Starship launch.
Sure. So this was Starship's 8th test flight, and it launched from Texas. And at first, things seemed okay, that massive super heavy booster did what it was supposed to do. It separated and then landed back on Earth.
Oh, that's the giant first stage rocket, right? The one that gives Starship that initial push to get off the Earth.
Exactly, yeah. But then about 9 minutes into the flight, the Starship upper stage, so that's the part that actually carries the payload, it started having engine problems.
And this is the second test flight in a row where the same kind of thing has happened, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, just like what happened back in January, that Starship upper stage, it lost control and it basically just started tumbling. SpaceX lost signal, and then, a little while after that, it exploded over the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow. Definitely not the kind of fireworks show anybody was hoping for. So how big of a setback is this for SpaceX? I mean, 2 explosions in a row, that can't be good for their timeline.
No, not at all. It definitely throws a wrench in their plans. They want to use Starship for all sorts of things, like missions to the moon, colonizing Mars, even point-to-point travel here on Earth someday. But before any of that can happen, they need to figure out why these upper stage engines keep failing.
And it's not just SpaceX that's affected by this, is it? Didn't NASA pick Starship to be the lander for their Artemis III mission? The one that's supposed to, finally put humans back on the moon?
Yep, that's right. NASA has, huge plans for Starship. They're depending on it to, get astronauts down to the surface of the moon. So every time Starship gets delayed, it pushes back those moon landing goals, too, which are pretty ambitious to begin with.
Well, speaking of delays, I bet this whole thing with Starship exploding has got to have people worried about those astronauts that are stuck on the ISS right now. It's because of problems with the Boeing Starliner, right? That was supposed to bring them back, but now what happens?
Well, the good news is that the Starliner issue and this Starship explosion are totally separate things. The astronauts on the ISS are safe and sound, and their return is already scheduled for later this month, late March 2025, on a different SpaceX spacecraft, the Crew Dragon.
Okay, so let's talk about Crew Dragon for a minute. It seems like it's SpaceX's reliable workhorse, quietly doing its job while Starship gets all the attention. Can you give us a quick rundown of what makes Crew Dragon so reliable?
Well, Crew Dragon is essentially a capsule, and it's designed just to take astronauts to and from low Earth orbit. It's been working for a while now, to taking crews back and forth to the ISS. It's part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. And it launches on a Falcon 9 rocket, which is another success story for SpaceX. Crew Dragon has gone through a ton of testing. It has all these built-in safety features, and most importantly, it just has a perfect track record. No issues at all.
So while Starship is all about, pushing those boundaries of space exploration, Crew Dragon is the one we can actually count on right now to get our astronauts home safe. That's kind of ironic when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. It really shows how complex space travel is. You're always trying to find that balance between ambition and innovation. And you always, you need safety and reliability, especially when there are people involved. Lives are at stake. It really makes you think about SpaceX's whole approach to this, doesn't it? They've been really loud about this rapid iterative development idea, like build fast, test it out, blow things up, learn from it, and just do it all over again.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. It seems like it works well for them, in some areas. But with Starship, it feels like they're running into the same problem over and over. I mean, is that strategy really the best way to do something as complicated as Starship?
That's a good question. I mean, you have 2 explosions in a row with, the same basic failure. It kind of seems like there's something wrong with the design, a fundamental issue that they haven't figured out yet. And, when you're dealing with a spacecraft this big and powerful, when something goes wrong, let's just say it's pretty dramatic.
Not to mention expensive.
Yeah.
I'm sure each one of those Starships costs a fortune to build.
Absolutely. And that's where you get into the whole taxpayer funding thing, too. SpaceX is a private company, but they get a lot of money from government contracts. including a big chunk of change from NASA for the Artemis program. So when a Starship explodes, it's not just SpaceX's money going up in smoke, it's our tax dollars too.
Right, that's a good point. I bet there are some people in Congress who are not too thrilled about seeing those explosions. It makes you wonder if, like, maybe this will affect how much money SpaceX gets in the future.
Yeah.
Or even funding for space exploration as a whole,
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Public opinion has a big effect on, how much support these space programs get. And when you have these huge failures that everyone sees, especially the ones that, send debris falling near where people live, it can make people less trusting. And they start wondering if it's worth the risk and the cost, too.
Right, that's a good point. But then again, space exploration has always been about pushing the limits, taking risks, and, accepting that sometimes things will go wrong. Think about the early days of rocketry. I mean, there were a lot of explosions back then too, right?
For sure. And I think it's important to remember that even with these setbacks, Starship is still a big step forward for spacecraft technology. I mean, it's designed to be completely reusable. It can carry massive payloads, and eventually it could totally change the way we get to space.
So it's kind of like a gamble. But if they can get it right, it'll be a game changer.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting to Mars. SpaceX has talked about using Starship for lots of things. Lunar bases, space tourism, even cleaning up space junk.
Okay, well, let's switch gears for a minute and get back to the astronauts who are waiting to come home from the ISS. You said they'll be coming back on Crew Dragon, which is good news, especially because of its safety record. But what does it mean that we have to depend on this space taxi system while we wait for Starship to, to work out all the kinks?
Well, it really shows that we need technology that's reliable, that we know we can count on, especially for human spaceflight. Crew Dragon proves that we can get to and from low Earth orbit safely and reliably, but it also shows the limits of what we can do right now.
How do you mean?
Well, Crew Dragon is made for those short trips to and from the ISS. It's not made to go into deep space, like it can't land on the moon or Mars. That would take a different kind of spacecraft, something much bigger and more complicated, like Starship.
So for now, we're kind of stuck in between. We can get to and from the ISS, but those bigger goals, those destinations that are further away are still a long way off.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it raises some interesting questions, like how long will it take SpaceX to fix the problems with Starship? Will NASA keep using them for Artemis, or will they have to find another option? And what about those other big plans for Starship? Like space tourism, point-to-point travel. Are those on hold now? Who knows?
Yeah, a lot of unknowns right now. But it just shows that space exploration takes a long time, and you have to expect the unexpected.
It definitely does. And it takes patience, too. And, you can't give up. And a little bit of optimism never hurts. Because even with these problems, there's still so much to be excited about. I mean, the James Webb Space Telescope is sending back these incredible pictures from deep space, The Mars rovers are still exploring, and we have all these new astronauts who want to push the limits of what humans can do in space.
Well, speaking of pushing limits, this whole thing with Starship makes you wonder about, the future of humans in space. Elon Musk has said he wants us to be a multi-planetary species, colonizing Mars, all that. But if we can't even get a rocket to orbit without it blowing up, is that all just, a pipe dream?
That's a great question. And I think the answer depends on how you look at those long-term goals. Are they actual plans with a specific timeline, or are they more like an idea, something that pushes us to develop new technology and see what's out there?
Yeah, probably a little bit both. But realistically, if we're talking about having people living on Mars permanently, that's still decades away, even if everything goes perfectly. And we've got a lot of problems to solve here on Earth before we can even think about colonizing another planet.
I agree. And I think it's important to have these conversations to really think about the pros and cons of these space projects, because at the end of the day, space exploration is really a reflection of what it means to be human, our curiosity, our creativity, our need to understand where we fit in the universe. And like anything we do as humans, it comes with risks and rewards, and a lot of unknowns.
It's definitely a fascinating topic. But before we get too philosophical, there's one last question I've been thinking about.
I'm listening. What is it?
So, with these Starship explosions happening so close together, it makes you wonder, how much failure is okay when we're talking about, space exploration? Is there a point where the risks are just too much?
That's a really tough question. And there isn't really a right or wrong answer. I think it comes down to your point of view, how much risk you're comfortable with and what you consider an acceptable level of failure. For some people, any loss of human life is just, it's not acceptable, no matter what you could gain. But for other people, the idea of, gaining knowledge, pushing the limits of what we can do as humans, that justifies taking some risks.
And it's not just about people either, right? There's also the environmental impact. I mean, rockets use a ton of fuel, and when they explode, they release a lot of stuff into the atmosphere. It's not great for the environment.
You're absolutely right. The environmental impact is something we need to consider. SpaceX says they're trying to find solutions that are more sustainable, but it's a really tough problem to solve, especially when you think about how big their plans are. I mean, imagine launching like dozens or even hundreds of starships to Mars. That's going to have a huge impact on the environment.
It seems like every time we take a step forward in space, there are all these new challenges and ethical questions that come up. But it's also really exciting to think about what we might achieve.
Oh, for sure. We're living in a pretty amazing time. We have the technology to go beyond Earth, to explore other planets, maybe even find proof that there's life somewhere else in the universe. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And it's a journey that's going to be full of surprises and probably some setbacks too. But I think it's a journey we have to take, even if we don't reach every single goal, Just trying, just going for it can lead to amazing discoveries, new technology, and a better understanding of our place in the universe.
I completely agree, and I think that's what makes space exploration so captivating. It's a story that's still being written, and we're all a part of it, whether we're, supporting the missions, following the discoveries, or just, looking up at the night sky and thinking about how big the universe is. We're all connected to this amazing endeavor.
Well said. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap up this deep dive. We talked about a lot today, from rockets that explode, to astronauts who are stuck in space, to the big questions about what it means to explore space. We hope you found it interesting and something to think about.
Who knows what's going to happen next? Maybe Starship will get over these problems and become that amazing spacecraft they're dreaming of. Or maybe there will be some brand new technology that comes along and takes us further than we ever thought possible.
Well, one thing's for sure. The story of space exploration is definitely not over, and we can't wait to see what happens next.
So, until next time, keep looking up, keep exploring, and keep asking those big questions, because that's what pushes us forward as a species. It's what makes us reach for the stars.
And maybe even beyond. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.